All right, everyone. Jeremy Knopf here with another episode of the Public Relations Declassified live stream. And we're going to be talking about a topic today that, from what I see in general out in the public, I see a lot of people handling this incorrectly in a way that damages their brand. And that causes long-term consequences, right? So we're going to go ahead and talk today about how AI can damage your brand. Now, a couple of things I want to touch on here. First of all, AI is not inherently bad. It's not inherently ineffective. None of those things, right? If used properly, AI can bring a ton of value to your business and to your brand. But most people use it incorrectly. So let's start off by talking about where you actually should be using AI. So you can use it in brainstorming, right? You're out here looking for ideas. Maybe you're looking for content ideas. You're looking for identifying something unique in your background that would be good to use in your brand. You might be looking for people to align with who share the same values. They have the same views as you. They have a similar audience, right? Maybe they're doing something different than you, but they have the same type of audience that would be also ideal for you, right? This is a great way to use AI because it has access to a ton of information, and it's a lot easier to get that information from AI than it was, back in the day to go use Google and search for a bunch of stuff. It's also really good for planning, right? It will help you to identify holes in a content strategy, for example, or it will help you identify opportunities for content or pitching the media related to maybe particular holidays or significant days, something where there's a lot of people talking about a particular thing on a particular day, right? This is a great way to use AI. And then just research in general. Now, there is a caveat here, and that is that we have to actually fact check everything that we get from AI because it is notorious for not only getting things wrong, but also completely making things up. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. That is an area where it can actually be a minefield for you and for your brand if you don't fact check everything. So now that we've talked about where you should be using AI in ways that help your brand, let's talk about where you should not be using AI. Now, I will get some pushback on this one, but I will say a lot of your content, you should not be using AI to make your content, right? This applies to your bio, right? You've probably got a bio on your social media profiles. Maybe there's a bio in your website somewhere. There's a bio in any articles that you contribute to any other media outlets. I generally don't like to use AI for that for reasons that we'll discuss shortly. Your website copy as well, right? Yes, maybe it can write really well, grammatically correct and all of that, but there's huge problems that we're going to talk about more shortly. Articles. Now, this is not just because of the obvious problems, but also if an article is AI, first of all, the search engines don't like that. So media outlets don't like to publish AI. It damages their credibility, but also it can hurt them in search rankings. So we want to avoid that. And then social media. Look, you've all seen the slop that's all over every social media platform, and you can tell that it's AI, right? We don't want to do that. And then when it comes specifically to public relations, we want to avoid using AI in our pitches, right? If we're sending a pitch to a journalist, we don't want to use AI there. And in the cases where, you're using a tool where journalists are on a platform where they're looking for sources and they have a particular set of questions, for example, that they want you to answer, don't use AI in that either. Look, these are people who deal with words all day, every day. They can spot AI that fast. And most of you don't know about this, but journalists hate when people use AI for their pitches, for their responses to the queries, all of that. And this is something in the private industry groups that you guys don't have access to, where all of the journalists and the editors and the producers are all, engaging and finding, contacts for various things and just venting like you do on any Facebook group or anything like that. They are often complaining about people using AI in their pitches and in their responses. And it's one of those things that if you do that, not only will you get blacklisted by that journalist, but you're probably also going to end up on a list somewhere, because they do have these blacklists where, they share a bad experience they've had with a particular source. And so not only can this hurt you in your relationship with that journalist and your opportunity to get that media feature, but it can also have long lasting impact, because if you end up on one of these lists, other journalists who have never interacted with you are likely to ignore you at that point going forward as well. So big problem. So why should we specifically not use AI in these cases when it comes to our content, on our website, social media, articles, etc., or when dealing with media? Well, first of all, everyone can tell. Look, there are certain words, there are certain phrases, and there are certain patterns in AI writing. You're using a computer to basically model language, and it's trained on a certain set of data. And because of that, there is a consistent pattern in all of the AI content. And look, you may not be able to identify it 100% of the time. You may not be able to say definitively, yes, this is absolutely AI content, but you know it when you see it most of the time. And this is especially important when it comes to journalists, like I said, because they deal with words all day, every day. So they are especially sensitive to this. They can spot things that other people won't see. And what this ends up doing is two things. One is that it makes you look lazy, right? You couldn't make the time to actually sit down and write your thoughts. You had to go to ChatGPT and have it regurgitate shit for you. It's a little bit different if you're giving a very structured outline to some AI tool and telling it to write an article based on that outline. But where I see a lot of people really botch it is they just straight up tell the AI, create a bunch of content for me on XYZ topic. And it's very generic. It's very bland. It doesn't have your voice. It doesn't have your personality. So in addition to making you look lazy, it also makes you look inauthentic. And right now we are living in what's commonly called a trust recession, right? People don't trust people that they see online because there is a lot of inauthenticity. There is a lot of people who are presenting themselves as one thing, but they're really not, right? I'm seeing this a lot right now in the real estate industry. A lot of these people who have been presenting themselves as ballers over the years, right now are actually starving. Like their revenue is through the floor. They're having to borrow money just to stay afloat. They're not able to afford normal things that normal people could, especially at their level, right? And so people are starting to see that the image you create online is not always realistic. It's not always accurate. And so authenticity is such a powerful asset for you. And so if you are not leaning heavily on AI to create your content, if you're just authentically creating content, you're writing it yourself, or you're getting on video and you're talking about a topic yourself, that's completely different. And people can feel that, right? It's not just a matter of, it's not because you used AI, it's because it's inauthentic. On the other hand, the content that you're creating or the responses that you're sending to journalists that you're actually writing yourself, those resonate because they are authentic. It is your actual words and people can feel that, right? I can't explain why, but you've experienced it. You've been on both sides of it probably. You've probably posted something that you knew wasn't quite you and it just didn't resonate with your audience. But at the same time, you've probably seen a bunch of people who they post this AI slop and you're like, yeah, that's just complete garbage. And I don't trust that person, right? And not that you necessarily think that they're a bad person, but just that there's not that level of trust that there might otherwise be. The other problem with this, though, is if you're leaning heavily on AI, and especially if you're just using AI by default, like out of the box, right? Where you go in, you just give it a prompt to create some content, versus there are people who have used AI effectively to create content. The difference is they have built a system that actually trains the AI on their voice so that it communicates in the way that they do. Now, as someone who has done that, I can tell you that it takes a lot of work. There's a lot of trial and effort. There's going to be a lot of mistakes that you have to try things out. That didn't work. Let's try something else. And you just kind of experiment until you can get it to really understand your voice and convey that in the content that it creates. Most people don't take that step because it frankly requires a lot of work and a lot of time. So what ends up happening is their brand sounds just like everyone else. There's no differentiation, and that leads to commodification, right? If you're no different than anyone else, then the only thing to judge you by is your price. And at that point, it's a race to the bottom. If everybody else seems the same from a branding perspective, well, your next choice is to find the person or company who's going to do that service or provide that product at the lowest price, because they're all seen as commodities. So this ends up creating a weak and diluted brand that doesn't really stand the test of time. It doesn't convert as high as it could. You don't build that sense of community. You don't have, very loyal, passionate customers or clients. And so that's what AI does to your brand. Now, there is another facet of this that is a little more nuanced, a little bit more technical, and that is having incorrect information in the AI tools. So this isn't really a matter of using AI, but it's a matter of AI misrepresenting your brand. And this is another way that your brand can be hurt by AI. So more people today are using AI compared to Google than at any point in the past, right? Most people are still using search engines, but the number of people using AI as their primary source, or especially as their secondary source or a supplementary source, is very large and growing. So if people are not finding information in these AI tools that presents your brand in a powerful and authoritative way, they're going to have some skepticism about the legitimacy of you and your brand. And the reality is that the AI responses for most brands are inaccurate. Whether you're talking about a personal brand or a company brand, often there's going to be a lot of incorrect information in there. And that's because the sources where AI gets its information that it trains its LLMs on, you're not showing up in them, right? And that's primarily media, right? Traditional media, to a lesser degree, press releases. But getting featured in the media is a surefire way to ensure that your brand shows up accurately and in an authoritative way within these AI tools. And this is something that at this point in time is absolutely essential, but most people are not doing this, and it's a huge missed opportunity, because if they're not getting that information in these tools when they're looking for you, then, like I said, they're going to be skeptical. They're going to be less likely to convert into paying clients. They'll be less likely to refer you to other people. And so it creates a lot of challenges for your business. And as time goes on and these AI tools become better and more people rely on them more heavily, it's going to basically become what Google has been for the last 20 years, right? It used to be that you have to show up in Google. You have to, rank for your name. You have to have your website. You have to have good stuff about you in the search results. The same applies to the AI tools now. So if you're not actively taking steps to ensure that your brand does show up in these AI tools in an accurate and an authoritative way, you're missing some huge opportunities. So we'll go ahead and segue into Jeremy's PR PSA, which is relying on AI for your brand's content ensures that your brand will be unappealing and won't stand out, making it completely useless. Look, the reality is, in order for a brand to be effective, it has to differentiate you. It has to make you seem different than your competitors in some way. And if you're relying on AI for that, you're not going to do that. Your content is going to sound just like everybody else. It's going to be diluted. There's not going to be anything within your brand that really gives people anything to resonate with, because it's very much a me too, I'm just like everybody else kind of approach. So don't overly rely on AI for your content. there's certainly ways that you can, like, tools like Opus Clip for chopping up your content. That's totally fine. There's no problem. That's video that you've already created and you're just chopping it up into a whole bunch of shorts. But having it actually write your content, write your scripts, things like that, don't do that unless you've really put in the effort to make sure that the AI is outputting content that legitimately sounds like you. And don't use AI for your pitches. Don't use AI for your responses to journalists. They're going to spot that. It's going to hurt your reputation with them, and you're not going to get featured in the media with that anyway. So avoid these things. Make sure that you are showing up in the tools by getting featured in the media, and you're going to be in a lot stronger position than most of your competitors. This is your opportunity to get ahead of the curve and really start to gain a huge competitive advantage. All right, guys, that's going to be a wrap for today. If you guys found something valuable in this, I would love it if you'd share it with somebody. Be sure to drop us a comment on social media. And if you're not already subscribed, head over to YouTube, check us out there, and make sure to hit that subscribe button. All right, thanks, guys, and I will see you all on the next episode.